Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks if Donald Trump is a narcissist. Another related question here would be, if Trump is a narcissist, is the narcissism adaptive or maladaptive? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoy this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. At the time of making this video, Donald Trump is the President of the United States. There's an election coming up, the outcome of which is uncertain, as is the case with most elections. There has been a great deal of debate over Donald Trump's personality characteristics. Specifically, many people believe that he is narcissistic. Now, as I talk about what could be happening in a situation like this, I'm strictly talking about observable behavior in the context of narcissism, not narcissistic personality disorder, which is a mental disorder listed in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM. Only a clinician treating Donald Trump could speak on that topic. In this video, I'll be looking at various statements that Trump has made and things he has done, which again are observable. They represent his actions, which are often tied to personality. Now, sometimes people act in a way that is not consistent with their personality. For example, professional actors in movies. Could it be that the behavior we see with Donald Trump is really just his persona and does not speak to his personality? The argument I've heard against this theory, that perhaps it is a persona, is that one person could not maintain this persona for as long as Trump has. No one could stay in character that long. Another argument would be, does it really matter if we're looking at a person or a persona? If somebody only behaves in a manner consistent with their persona, then the end result is the same. These are interesting arguments, but it's really hard to know the essence of a person from seeing them at a distance. It can actually be difficult to know someone even if you interact with them at close range for a long time. So that question can never really be answered. It is difficult to know what is a person and what is a persona. Before I look at Trump's behavior, I will define narcissism. Narcissism is a personality construct that is divided into two types, grandiose and vulnerable. Both types of narcissism are associated with self-centeredness, a sense of entitlement, a failure to learn from experiences, a need for admiration, deception, and an investment in fantasy. Usually, when we're talking about this, we're talking about an extensive investment in fantasy. Grandiose narcissism is characterized by arrogance, social boldness, self-confidence, having superficial charm, being resistant to criticism, being optimistic, and being unemotional. Vulnerable narcissism has characteristics like being resentful, distrusting, insecure, defensive, having a lot of shame, being hypersensitive to criticism, being socially awkward, distant, pessimistic, unforgiving, and having internalized anger. A quick way to understand the difference between the two would be to consider how 3 of the big 5 personality traits express in each type of narcissism. Both types of narcissist are low in agreeableness. So they don't trust people, they're not straightforward, they don't have the good of humanity in mind, they're competitive as opposed to cooperative, and they lack empathy. Grandiose narcissists score high in extroversion and low in neuroticism. So again, both grandiose and vulnerable have that low score in agreeableness. What really distinguishes the two would be extroversion and neuroticism. So high extroversion and low neuroticism for grandiose narcissist, and in the case of vulnerable narcissist, we see low extroversion and high neuroticism. This means that a grandiose narcissist will be outgoing, talkative, assertive, sensation-seeking, and at the same time, they will be cold, unfeeling, and not reactive to stress. The vulnerable narcissist, on the other hand, would be shy, reserved, introspective, while also being emotionally reactive, depressed, and anxious. Even though most narcissists are primarily one type or the other, almost every narcissist has characteristics from both types. Some theories say that narcissists actually move back and forth between the two types to some degree. With this understanding of narcissism in mind, let's look at some of Trump's behavior and quotes. Trump has fired a number of people who work for him. One study that spanned 32 months examined 65 positions in the executive office of the president. The study found that 78% of those positions turned over since Trump took office. 25% have turned over 2 or more times. Again, that's just a 32-month period. I believe it's actually somewhat higher right now. Trump has made claims citing unknown sources. This is a common tactic with narcissists. They want to pretend like they have other people on their team, even though their thinking has actually isolated them. Trump seems to have a fairly high opinion of himself. For example, he uses a number of superlatives and similar terms in an effort to convince people how amazing he is, like greatest, best, and huge. He said, "I think I'm actually humble. I think I'm much more humble than you would understand." The fact that he could not understand the irony of this statement is pretty frightening. It's like it sums everything up just in one phrase. He said he will build a great wall, and nobody builds a better wall than him. He also said nobody knows more than taxes about me, maybe in the history of the world. These nobody is or nobody knows statements are pretty common with Donald Trump. Many quotes seem to be designed to attract admiration. For example, he talked about how his inauguration was going to be potentially record-setting and how movie stars would be there, implying a desire to be around so-called high-status individuals. He said that all the women on The Apprentice flirted with him, consciously or unconsciously. That's to be expected. So this leaves him a convenient excuse if one or several of those women say they never flirted with him. He can say, "Oh, that was unconscious." It's difficult to believe he really understands what the word unconscious means. He said that my IQ is one of the highest and you all know it. Technically, it does appear as though Trump has above average intelligence. He graduated from Wharton Business School at the University of Pennsylvania. It is generally regarded as a pretty good program. We see these reports that Trump's IQ was 156. That would be almost 4 standard deviations above the mean, meaning his IQ would be higher than 99.99% of the population. That is extremely difficult to believe. It seems reasonable to believe that his score may be somewhat higher than average, as I indicated. I think Trump stands as a reminder that intelligence has almost no connection to personality. Trump may have been deceptive on several occasions. For example, he has denied knowing Prince Andrew, even though there are many photographs where they are featured together. Narcissists typically seek to get rid of inconvenient facts. Some of Trump's behavior does not seem pro-social. For example, he said, "The point is, you can never be too greedy." These are just a few behaviors and quotes. There are many, many more. I would need hours, if not days, to cover all of them. In considering all the information available, there does seem to be a clear alignment between Trump's behavior and narcissism. One could argue that it's one of the clearest alignments that there is. Perhaps Trump would say it's the greatest or best alignment. It's a huge alignment. Nobody has an alignment like that, perhaps in the history of the world. So with the issue of narcissism seeming fairly clear, the question then becomes, is the narcissism adaptive or maladaptive? Although many argue it's maladaptive, some have made the argument that it's a healthy, prosocial narcissism that helps everybody. I think a good way to illustrate this debate is through an analogy. Let's say that there is a narcissistic commercial aircraft pilot. For this example, the pilot will be male. When a plane is flying, for the most part, the fate of the passengers is the same as the fate of the pilot. I know there have been exceptions. There have been aviation accidents where pilots have survived and passengers have not. But it's reasonable to believe that if a plane crashes, everyone in the aircraft is going to, at a minimum, have a bad day. Now, the pilot of this aircraft believes he is the best pilot ever. He likes the way that people look at him when he walks through the airport terminal in his uniform. He's proud to be a pilot. And because of that, he has studied diligently. He has practiced in flight simulators. He pays attention when learning about emergency procedures and the technical aspects of flight. So this pilot is flying a commercial aircraft. The aircraft is full of passengers. And we see that something goes wrong with one of the elevators. This is a flight control surface typically located at the tail section of the aircraft. It's not responding properly to input, so the pitch of the aircraft becomes difficult to control. The co-pilot and people on the ground, like air traffic control, start to come up with various solutions that may actually be harmful because they don't realize that the problem is with the elevator at this point. So they're kind of starting at the beginning, going through various checklists. The pilot ignores their advice because he has figured out right away what went wrong. He is able to land the aircraft even with limited control over the pitch. To many, the pilot is a hero. He saved all of the passengers, the flight crew, and himself, not to mention anybody who might have been on the ground and been hit by the plane if it had crashed. It appears to be a case of adaptive narcissism. He knew better than everyone else. He was able to act faster. He knew exactly what the problem was. If he had listened to all those advisors, precious time would have been lost. When adjusting this analogy to maladaptive narcissism, we see that the same thing actually happens. There's a problem with the aircraft. The pilot saves everyone. The pilot is a hero. The only difference now is that we learn that the pilot caused the damage to the elevator in the first place. I appreciate the argument of adaptive narcissism, and I think there are some circumstances where it appears as though narcissism is helpful, and there may even be some where it is helpful. But often there's a more complex narrative that actually leads back to the realm of the maladaptive. Going back to the situation with Donald Trump, I don't believe it's a matter of whether or not the narcissism is maladaptive. It almost certainly is. Rather, I think it's a question of, are there positive or prosocial abilities that compensate for the maladaptive narcissism? One characteristic does not necessarily define a person. Everyone has to decide for themselves what's important and what's not. So those are my thoughts on Donald Trump and narcissism. Please put any thoughts and opinions in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.